So thank you very much for inviting us to share our experiences both operating and complying under AB 32, and particularly the business constraints and realities for us as Chevron. As Chevron, we are uniquely qualified to discuss the impact on business because some years ago, our Chevron refinery wanted to do a remodel. And as a part of that remodel, under our conditional use permit, the City of Richmond incorporated an AB 32-like condition in the refinery conditional use permit. So we've been at this a couple of years looking at how can we reduce CO2. And before that, we had been working on energy efficiency. And in fact, we have reduced our energy usage about 20% over the last 10 years. We're members, we've been reporting on our CO2 and members of the Climate Action Registry, and we've been reporting publicly since 2002. We've been making great strides in reducing our energy usage. So the CUP requires 36,000 tons per year reduction, beginning in 2009, going to 2020. And so in total, at the end of this period, we would have reduced 432,000 tons of CO2. And you know, we've been looking at how to reduce CO2 for some years before this in anticipation. So we're facing today the reality of how does a company comply. Next slide. And for the first 2 years, we can find reasonable reductions. And for less than $100 a ton, we can reduce the CO2 and meet those permit conditions. Using known technologies, things like variable flow drives, changing and optimizing systems, and changing impellers and pumps, things like that, things that are available to us. So for about 2 years, we can do that. After 2 years, though, we start to reach a limit. And this bind that we face is specifically because we are already energy efficient. And by looking at extreme options, and one of those options is to do a pilot project on carbon sequestration. So even using those kinds of measures, in 4 years, we see costs that range between $100 to $200 a ton. So if you think about 36,000 tons a year, that's between $3 million and $7 million a year to the refinery to be able to reduce CO2. But after 4 years, we don't see any further options to reduce the CO2 and comply with our permit. So our compliance reality is that after 6 years, we only see 3 possible options. One option is carbon capture and sequestration, and I don't know how well versed you are in that, but certainly 6 years is not enough time to even permit such a project. But that would be one possible option, and certainly, you know, we are looking at that. Another option is offsets, and offsets would be allowable after we've exhausted, under our permit, after we've exhausted local options, and those are, we would think would be available in 6 years for about $40 a ton, and certainly that's more cost effective. And if you'd like to see this pictorially, it's on the next slide. So what we face, which is very, very serious, is the inability to comply after about 6 years and not really being able to make much more than half of the reductions that we need. This is very serious for our company, and many executives signed off on the original permit because we thought we could do it. We thought that the technology would be available, and that's just not the reality that we're facing. Next slide. And so some of the lessons that we would like to share with you is that while we would like to make these reductions, that really cost-effective and accessible opportunities are limited, particularly given that California has pushed and led the nation in energy efficiency, and we have led as well within our own industry. So that as new technology comes along, certainly we follow those opportunities, but they're very limited, and sometimes they have possible safety concerns as well. One example would be to electrify. Many people talk about electrifying the refinery, but if you have a power outage and you've electrified your refinery, you can have environmental releases, and that's something that we're just not willing to consider. So what we see is that carbon capture, sequestration, and offsets are really the only options. And there's a tremendous cost that comes with carbon capture, sequestration, and time. So that's one message that we would really like to share with you, because this is something that has been in legislation, and you may see again, it's a fairly important option, especially in the short term. The San Joaquin Valley, we have a project that we would like to see happen. But this is a new project. It's a new technology application, and I think people know that generally in the San Joaquin Valley we tend to think of the oil fields as being on a decline, and the economy would likewise be on a decline over time. This project would, in fact, continue the jobs and the economic activity in the San Joaquin Valley, but it does come with the challenge of increased CO2, possibly 25% more. And with that, there's no baseline to this project. It's new. We don't have existing operations that can offset it. So in that case, the only possible way to address a new project like that is to allow for offsets. There isn't any way to reduce something when we don't have an existing project today. And the advantage to this project, in addition to continued jobs, is that it operates on the same footprint. So we don't have to see a large expansion. So just in conclusion, to share with you our experiences, we have been working and striving diligently to reduce our energy usage. And we are in the top quartile, next slide. We are in the top quartile among refineries. And this is third-party, independently verified data that's done in the refinery industry. We're in the top quartile. But what we do find is that, yes, compliance is possible, but it is very expensive without offsets. It's millions and millions of dollars, and it's not small. And we are concerned about where do we go from here? How do we expand? How do we, provide a supply for domestic production if we don't have accessible offsets or carbon capture sequestration? And that we see as a good solution is linkage to existing world carbon markets, and particularly to the EU, who may have had some problems in the early days, but it has, in fact, I think, met a fairly high level in terms of meeting the same criteria that the Air Resources Board is considering to ensure that a ton is actually reduced. A ton is a ton. And so our recommendation to you is to seriously consider that linkage, because that may be the way that we can see reductions occur and not simply leak our economic activity and jobs to other states.